Welcome to the Builders of Authority podcast, a show committed to helping you build authority for your brand. In the realm of business and personal branding, authority stands as a cornerstone. Authority isn't built overnight, it's built over time. So join us as we build something remarkable together. And now, here's your host, Adam McChesney.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Builders of Authority podcast. Our title sponsor for the podcast is Go High Level, also known as GHL. GHL is the first ever all-in-one platform that will give you the tools, support, and resources you need to succeed and crush your marketing goals. Personally, I've used this software since 2020. It's been a game changer for my business and our clients. If you're looking to level up your CRM and marketing game, then this is the platform to use. You can find a link for a free and extended 30-day trial with tons of Builders of Authority bonuses in the show notes. Take advantage of this opportunity to adopt GHL's amazing software and grow your business. I don't know how it took us this long to schedule this episode here today, but I'm grateful that we are doing this right now. About a year and a half ago, I got connected to this individual. Since then, he has joined our BOA Mastermind, came to one of our BOA live events, became a digital marketing client, and one of my biggest supporters. He's not only a client, but also a friend, someone I can go to and get advice from, and someone I look up to. A few weeks ago, we had the opportunity to grab dinner while I was in Springfield for another podcast. My guest today is Chris Treese. He's the owner of Olympus Outdoors in Springfield, Missouri, and he's also a coach for contractors in their businesses. Chris, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming, so I'm glad we're having the chance to do it, and glad we had a chance to sit down a couple weeks ago, man.
Feels like it was just a couple months ago when we met. Kind of crazy. It's coming up on 2 years.
It is, man. Time flies when you're having fun. So tell the audience a little bit about who Chris is and kind of what you do at Olympus Outdoors.
Sure. So I'm Chris Treese. Like you said, I lived in Springfield, Missouri. I've got 3 kids, happily married. I own Olympus Outdoors as my main gig. We build luxury outdoor living spaces, primarily where my kind of my why and my ideal client is to actually serve the guy in the household for once.
Yeah.
A lot of contractors are super into kitchens and bathrooms or custom home builders and all this stuff. And that serves the family, and that's typically serves the wife. But you have a lot of guys, especially more entrepreneurial guys that work 80, 100-hour weeks. You and I have both been there. They do all this stuff for their family, and they don't get anything specifically at home for them. So most of the time, our clients are people that have done the kitchen remodels, done the bathroom remodels, taking care of their family's needs. And now I get to help them create their dream space, whether that's an outdoor kitchen or a new sunroom, a covered patio area, pool, whatever that looks like, to celebrate the achievements that they've had and make them feel appreciated.
That's awesome. So I know, obviously, in working with you, we've kind of defined a couple different things, whether it's the ads, the SEO, the website, all around that stuff. I'm assuming from a branding standpoint, you weren't always that dialed in on your ideal client. So probably going from somebody that, like, when you first got started, you're like, yeah, I'll do this and I'll do that. How did you kind of come to that conclusion, and what has like getting super clear on your ideal client and project done for you?
Yeah. So, one, I started construction when I was 15. My stepdad had a company. So in the summers, I worked with him. After school, I would work with him. And then I thought I was going to run that company. I found out it is not easy to work with family. So any of you listeners who do that, more props to you, a lot of respect. Ended up going back to school to get my degree in construction management. Moved to Kansas City for a couple of years as a sales career. Basically got told I was too young to be as successful as I wanted to be in that. And then moved back and started my own thing. So I have done construction I've owned my own company since 2014. And I actually started installing windows for Lowe's. I came back. I needed something quickly. I'd been back for like 3 months when I found out my now wife was pregnant with our first kid. So money was super important. And so I went to there. I made pretty good money, and I would take anything. But when you work for Lowe's, they sell everything. So you can't sell any jobs on your own. And the guy that I was working with at the time was in his 60s, didn't really have a business. He'd always been just an installer for someone. He didn't have a brand to sell. And I realized at that point that I needed to build a brand, build a business so that eventually I could retire, I could sell it, I can make enough money to have some freedom. And so I started doing that. I moved along and started installing for the local Pella store. They allowed me to sell anything. And just like every contractor who gets started, I'd take any job you could get. So my first big break was I went to install one window for them, and I sold a $62,000 kitchen. And then it was kind of off to the races.
That's
So,
all.
Yeah, we chased everything. We built a couple homes. We did a lot of kitchens and bathrooms. We did decks. We did sunrooms. If you needed it done and we needed to stay busy, we would do it. But I found as we went along that one, we were never as efficient as I wanted to be because we were trying to do 15 different things. Two, we cast this really broad net, and I was constantly just chasing any lead that would come in.
Yeah.
So through the years, we kind of niched down, and we just started doing a lot of decks and sunrooms, and that was okay. But in Missouri, you don't have to have a license to be a contractor.
Yeah.
You just have to go pay the city for a business license, so you can pull permits. And so we found a lot of chuck in a truck guys on decks were beating us out, especially on just treated decks. Composites, we had a little more success. But I've always wanted to be in the luxury space because I like pleasure money a lot. It's a lot more fun to spend pleasure money with a client than it is to spend pain money. And so we just kind of eventually niche down, and there's not a lot of competition in outdoor living. And then I kind of started as I started to get into outdoor living, I kept trying to figure out, because everyone always talks about what's your why, what's your perfect client, what's this. And as a guy who does work 70, 80, 100-hour weeks sometimes, it can be challenging to feel appreciated for all of that. And my wife is fantastic about it. But it's just the nature of it, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Kids, they require a lot of attention. And I thought, well, if I feel like that, I feel like a lot of other people will. And so it just started to naturally grow, and it really resonated with me. So we just stuck to it, so I can hopefully help some guys feel appreciated for all the hard work they've done over years and decades.
Yeah. So I bet a lot of people are kind of like listening to this and it's like, okay, you're in Springfield, Missouri, which is obviously not the size of St. Louis. And I even know contractors in St. Louis that they're like, I'm afraid to like niche down because I don't know if there's going to be enough business there. What can you say to somebody that like has that thought and methodology of like the importance of it? And you've been able to prove this in like a much smaller market than like a bigger city on just doing that, but then like sticking to it, even though it's probably not always like the easiest thing to do. You probably get projects that you're like, man, I like could do that. And there's probably some decent money, but like, it's probably going to be a bigger headache than what it's actually worth.
Yeah. So the answer goes to a lot more than just niching down, but a lot of times data just beats your emotions. So if you think about it, Springfield, like in the general metro area, is probably 400,000 to 500,000 people.
Yeah.
My average ticket size is like 65 grand. So let's say I want to do $1.2 million. I need 20 jobs. You're telling me out of 400,000 people, you can't find 20 that want to spend the money?
Yeah.
That's like an infinitesimally small percentage of the population. And I think just once you actually look at the numbers, it's really not that hard. You just have to find someone, which is why I pair with you, that can help you get your name out there and find those people. So yeah, I mean, it's just like, obviously I've worked with some clients that are in really, really rural areas, like 10,000 people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably going to be hard to find, enough money to sustain in that small of a niche.
Yeah.
But any decent size area, I feel like if you just put your emotions aside and don't let fear dictate your actions, it'll take care of you.
Absolutely. So I know you've obviously like you got your business right now. You've coached contractors over the last couple of years. So I kind of want to shift some focus there because I think it kind of plays off what we talked about. A lot of contractors listen to this. A lot of people that, maybe they're stuck in some sort of aspect. In working with contractors and seeing some of the biggest pain points that they're experiencing, I would say like in the 2025 ecosystem of things, whether it's the digital stuff, whether it's pricing, whether it's product and materials going through the roof. What are some of the things that you're seeing right now that you would recommend people really dial in on and focus on, so then that way they're not taking a look at like, man, am I going to survive this wave in business?
Yeah. So the number one thing, which you hear a lot of people say, and it's not just because I'm on your podcast, but marketing is the last thing you should cut. Because marketing, a good marketer, now obviously you can't use someone who's just going to throw you a bunch of trash leads or run your own, and just, it has to be effective. But marketing is your lifeblood, and whether that's paid ads or it's going door to door, it doesn't necessarily cost money. It just costs time or money, and you have to pick which one. But if you cut the marketing, you don't get leads, and if you don't get leads, you don't sell jobs. If you don't sell jobs, you don't make money. So that's probably the number one thing I would tell clients. You teed that up very nicely, Mr. Have a marketing company.
Wasn't it my intention, but I figured your answer might go along those lines.
It's true, man. And I've worked with 6 different marketing companies in my time. Some of them were great, some of them weren't, but they all still gave more results than I would have had with nothing.
Yeah.
And that's just the biggest thing. You know, if you want to be, depending on your area, you want to be a $500,000 to $750,000 a year guy, and you want to be a solopreneur, and you want to operate your own deal, you can probably get by with word of mouth.
Yeah.
But at some point, you're just going to run that thing to its limit, and so you've got to expand.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of times, whether it's time of the year, whether it's just like cash flow being an issue or whatever, like all the things that are very, very like prevalent in business, I look at it as like, those are the best times to just like find a way to continue to market. One of my first clients, literally the first like active website I ever built for somebody that was their actual brand back in 2020, Olympic Moving, they're a moving company down in Dallas. And it was literally when, like, right after obviously the pandemic happened, he's like, dude, like, I don't have a lot of money, but can we just like build a simple website and then run Facebook ads and do some other stuff? And he's been a client outside of like a couple months last year with my whole situation, that he's been a client for almost 5 years now. And he's like, dude, the best thing I ever did was spend money when no one didn't, because it helped get my name out there. And I had like a 6-month head start, even though he had just literally started business. So I think it's like a reaffirmation again, whether it's the economy, the time of the year, all those different things, is like, find a way to make it happen. And it doesn't always have to be tying into the personal branding aspect of this, which is what I want to kind of get into here in a second, is it doesn't always have to be paid. Like, obviously that's going to help escalate things, but like a lot of people are like, well, I either want to do paid, and if I can't afford paid, like I'm not willing to go knock doors. I'm not willing to go into networking events. I'm not willing to post on social media. Like, I have a couple of those clients right now, and I'm sure you've talked to people that are just like, no, it's either I'm going to get like the easiest lead that comes into me, or I'm not going to post on social media. And I just don't know why it's got to be either or. It's got to be a combined approach. What are your thoughts on that?
Fear is the only reason you won't go knock doors. Fear is the only reason you won't go to events. Fear is the only reason you won't post. And I don't post. I'm in your BOA Mastermind. Yeah. I will go through a week or two and post a lot and put myself out there, and then I get a fear of judgment. And I'm sure I'm not the only one, right? Like, I've gone through a million things, and every time you go through a bad thing, you end up finding, as soon as you start talking about it, you find 2 or 3 more people going through the exact same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think if you're not willing, if you don't have the money and you can't pay for stuff, then you have to get over your fear. Otherwise, you're saying that your fear means more to you than your success does.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I think in addition to some of the fear stuff as well, so many people is like, they think it has to be perfect, right, in order to get started too. And so like,
why do they think that has to be perfect?
Time is like, yeah, just get started. If it is perfect, or it's like I would look back, like we're in the transition of going from my studio. So I was at a studio here with in St. Louis for my podcast. I'm doing a couple episodes here, and then I'm going to Adventure Unknown, where I'm a member at the business club. And I found my first podcast clip art that I built in Fiverr back in August 2020 that was like ready to go. And then I didn't launch the podcast for another 18 months because I thought everything had to be perfect. And then I waited for a studio, and everything was perfect, like from a production standpoint. But it was like, wow, now it's like only got to get leveled up. So I kind of set the bar super high, but I missed out on 18 months of what could have been.
Well, so to tie back into that fear, why did it have to be perfect?
It was a mental game. Like, I told myself the lie that if I was going to do this, it needed to be buttoned up, all those things. I also told myself the lie that, like, it can't be this easy. I tell people all the time is like, I thought I had to have all the nice equipment. I didn't think I could just actually get on Zoom and do it. And it's like, no, you can literally just get on Zoom like we're doing right now and literally do it at no different than another Zoom call and start a podcast.
Yeah, and I think, at least for me, when I tell myself all those things that you just said, I need it to be perfect because I fear that if it's not perfect, it won't be effective.
Mm-hmm.
It's only going to work if it's perfect, right? Or or like fear just always goes back to that, for me at least. And I think that's pretty prevalent for a lot of people. They think, man, if it's not perfect, people are going to judge me, or people are going to think poorly about me. And the honest truth is like, they probably will, especially if you're doing a good job.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to happen one way or another. Like, that's the thing is, like, people will either, and this is what I've realized over the years, is that people will either say something or have something to say about you taking action or not taking action. So you might as well go seek the action and seek the results and then have people say something either way. Like, there's no middle ground, because that's just the way in which life is, which kind of ties into some of the personal development side. So obviously, I know you've been in programs before, you've now coached people. Like, what has personal development and working on your business to not just have essentially another job for yourself, like, what has all of that done to escalate and probably condense time for you?
Yeah. So, well, on the personal development side, like, I just wouldn't, I don't recognize, my old self would not recognize who I am now.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, to give you an idea, like the first coaching program I ever did, one of my best friends who owns another construction company literally had to pay the $100 a month fee just to get me to join, because I was like, I can't afford $100 a month.
Yeah.
And then I think last year I spent like $35,000 on coaching and events and different things to go to. So like, just that leveling up and realizing that the more I put into it, if I'm willing to implement what I learned, that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But as long as I'm willing to implement what I learn in the training, you just never have a ceiling.
Mm.
Your ceiling stops when you stop doing the work.
Mm.
I heard Alex Ramosi talked about he spent $10,000 for an hour of Grant Cardone's time, and he said that made sense because Grant was one or two steps ahead of him.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't pay $1 million for an hour of Bill Gates' time, because that was like 15 levels, right? And so I think it's important to not only buy training and find coaches. Everybody should have a coach or a mentor. But I think it also makes sense to make sure you hire one who's just slightly ahead of you.
Yeah. I think that is something that not a lot of people talk about. Like, they talk about hire the coach, find a mentor, join the community or whatever. And that's one thing that I've realized, that I've done all these different programs and hired coaches and done all this stuff. And I've gained something from every which experience. But I just went through a process of hiring my first coach that, like, was also a marketing agency. Like, he exited his second marketing agency, and he's never grown it like mass, right? But he's grown it to where I want to grow it. And then potentially at some point, like I told him, is like, I'm not looking to sell it, but I want to make sure it runs without me. And in order to, like, have a sellable business, it has to run without you. So you have to, there's that book, Build to Sell. I haven't read it yet. I need to read it. But there's that aspect of, like, having the business be set up that way, right? But I didn't realize that, like, I was surrounding myself with people or taking advice from people that either weren't who they said that they were, hadn't done what I was looking to do. And so I'm implementing all these different things that they're telling me to do. And I'm like getting all the self-development out of it, and the business is growing. But then I'm still like, man, there's something missing, because I couldn't tangibly see and touch them doing what I was trying to do.
Yeah, I think that's super important. The first coaching group I was ever a part of, none of the coaches in there had ever ran more than a $2 million business.
Mhm.
So when we got to surpass $2 million, I was running into stuff that they hadn't dealt with.
Yeah.
And that's not a knock on them.
Yeah.
But now it's time to find a different coach who's gone to 10 million.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah.
and then once you get to 10, I have never got there, but once I get to 10, then I'll find the guy to help me get to 50.
Yeah.
And I think that's super important.
It's so crucial because it's like, again, I've only been working with my new coach for like 2 weeks and he's already like, here's where you're at. And here's what I did to go fix it. And I'm like, man, like should have done this years ago. Right. But like you have to also like, it's the most expensive investment I've ever made as well. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like the more you pay, there's typically better information, better access, and a quicker cadence. Like, yes, I am paying a lot more, but I'm also going to get where I'm trying to go quicker. So it's like, what am I willing to trade? Am I willing to make it go longer and spend a little bit less, right? And cut some corners here in different aspects. So I think a lot of it is like, what are you willing to sacrifice? Time, energy, money, resources, whatever that might be, in order to actually accomplish what you're looking to do.
Well, and also, I've heard this from multiple coaches, but I just said it to someone the other day. You're more invested if you're financially invested.
Yeah.
You know, I literally have listened to coaches say, like, I remember there's a guy, his name's Steve Shinholzer. He works for another coaching group, and he's a very matter of fact man. And I'll never forget, he was talking to a guy, and we were in this small group, and the guy was like, man, I just can't afford this. Da, 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 da. And he's like, if you'll just give me a free membership for 2 months, I'll make it worth it, and then I'll start paying. And Steve said, I'm not going to do that. He said, I can do it. He's got plenty of money. The free membership's not an issue. He said, but if you can't, it was $500 a month. So if you can't come up with $500 for 2 months, you don't want this bad enough. And you're not going to actually implement the stuff I'm teaching. And I think that's so true. And when you realize that time is worth something, you start to be willing to invest it. I sent a message to a guy the other day because one of my weak points is hiring. And I'm not great at interviewing. I'm not good at finding the perfect candidate the first time. I get too excited. And so I have to have like a whole process to follow. So I shot a buddy who's ahead of me in business, and I've known him for years, been a good friend, had a lot of deep conversations. And I said, hey man, I need help with this. And he said, cool, I'm happy to help. But full transparency, I'll give you 30 minutes for free and then you have to pay. He's a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
He's like, but I'm running a business. I coach other people. Like, my time is valuable. I can't just give it away endlessly for free. I respect that. I just said, cool, send me a bill.
Yeah. I think like that's a level up that I think like I have came to the conclusion on both sides with, right? So like I've always been like, to when people have said, hey, like Adam, I'm willing to help you, and they'll say do it for free. And I'm like, man, like if you need to charge me, or like if we have to do multiple stuff, like let's just do it. Like my coach that I just hired, like he mentored me for a couple of years for free. He did things that I'm like, man, I should have paid, like he should have charged me for those things. But it comes on the other end too, is like act and operate how you would want on the other end. Because as you and I are both growing, we have people that are reaching out to us all the time, like, hey, can I pick your brain? You got 30 minutes. Like I had somebody today reach out to me and they were like, hey man, I just need like an hour of your time. Like, what do you need an hour of my time for? Like, and I said, hey, it's going to cost X. And he was like, well, no. Like, I'm interested. I said, no, because I know you. We've already hopped on multiple calls before and you haven't implemented, like, you're going to waste my time again. So it's about standing strong and protecting your time, but also being willing and going to reciprocate that when you're the one needing the information too.
Yeah. Well, and there's always a time and place, right? Even to the point you said, the guy who reached out, you've talked to him before.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, I tell people all the time, even for my coaching stuff, like the first call is free. Sure.
Yeah.
Happy to give you a free one.
Yeah.
But then you have to show me you're implementing, and then either my value is worth it or it's not. Either way is okay.
Yeah.
But we're not coaching for free.
Yeah. So to that point, you hop on the call for free, right? You give them some information. What is the difference in people that you see of the people that actually go and implement, and then the people that don't? Like, what? I'll leave it at that. Like, what are the differences in those two human beings?
The first thing that jumps out at me is the guys who aren't going to implement are going to ask 1,000 minutia questions.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I'll give you a good example from your teaching, right? You say, like, one of the first things you should do, it doesn't matter if it's good or bad, you should post every day, right?
Yeah.
Well, I can either do one of two things. And this is the difference in the guys who are going to be successful and the guys that aren't. Either one, I can just go start posting every day. Or two, I can say, okay, well, what time? How long should it be? What should I talk about? What kind of camera should I get? What lens should it be? What tripod? None of that matters. Just post.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, even Mr. Beast, the biggest YouTuber in the world, says, go make 100 videos before you worry about any analytics.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just get the reps in.
Yeah.
And that's the difference.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense because, like, I look back, I made a YouTube video yesterday on the Digital Nomad Marketing channel, and it was like, hey, here's like the 5 red flags. I was gearing it towards marketing agencies, but it was really in any industry, right? Where people are wanting to like microman, like you're paying, like it's the funniest thing is like whether it's you, basically building an outdoor kitchen for somebody or you coaching a contractor or us doing the marketing services, like you're paying for our expertise and the deliverables of what we talked about, but then you're wanting to add stuff to the project and then expect us not to like say, well, hey, that's going to be 20,000 extra dollars. Like we can't just go add that thing in there. I can't add 5 pages to a website when you only paid for 8. All those different things. And then they're like, well, why are you doing this? And why are you doing that? And why? And it's like, do you want to go do it? Like you're paying us for a reason, right? So but it really does come down to exactly what you said is there is some fear. There is some like blockage for them to like not fully trust the process or the system. And you could give them all of the information and they're probably just not going to go implement it anyway.
Sure. Well, I mean, a perfect example of that is you've been on the calls when Halil's like, hey, can we do this? Do I have permission to do this?
Yeah.
I don't care. Go do it. You're the expert.
Yeah.
And now there have been a couple of things where I'm like, hey, man, I don't really like this. Can we tweak it?
Yeah.
But I don't need absolute 100% control because I'm not a marketer. Mm-hmm. You guys are good at it. If it doesn't work, I'll complain and we'll tweak. But it's worked so far.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great thing is like, I always tell people is like, you want to know enough to where you know with the eyeball test as if you were your customer, right? So like that's enough. And maybe obviously like a little bit more than that, but getting into the fine tune of the details, like when I have people come out to our house to do this stuff, I'm not like, hey, well, why aren't you putting, we got our water heaters, new water heaters a couple months ago. I'm like, well, why didn't you put that there? Like, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like, that's the same thing as like, man, I don't know the first thing about that. But a lot of times we want to like, again, make it seem as if we know more than we know in business when we're hiring people to help our business grow. I
think some of that maybe is a control thing.
Yeah.
Especially for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, yeah.
Like we're used to controlling everything in our business. So once you start to take the hats off, it can be scary.
Yeah.
I know as I've scaled and hired different people for different positions, like I'm a micromanager, and so it's really hard for me to just go let them do their thing.
Yeah.
But I'm a quotes guy. Dan Martell says one of my favorite quotes: 80% done by someone else is 100% awesome.
Yeah.
So,
I think a lot of it is like whether it's us running our own businesses or those clients that we're talking about. I don't think like you want one end of the spectrum because a lot of like marketers that I talk to, they're like, man, I absolutely love the people that know absolutely nothing. And then like, they never show up to meetings and I'm like, no, you don't want that. Like, cause then they're going to come up at some point and just like blow up, or they're going to be like, what the heck? Or they're not even answering their phone. And then there's just like so many different things. Like you want someone in the middle. And kind of on the end of contracting too, like you want someone that understands your value, that knows what they want. Like, hey, I want this outdoor kitchen. Like one of the like leads that came in the other day, like a guy was like, hey, I want this oven and I want whatever, like the people that know what they want, but then they're not going to sit over you and Chris, hey, Chris, why are you doing that? Why are you doing this? And the same thing with marketing, right? So I think like people are like, man, I don't want this person over here, like the Mr. Know-it-all, but maybe I want the person that knows absolutely nothing. It's like, no, you kind of want somebody invested that knows enough, because then everything gets better.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think just like you said, you don't want the guy who doesn't know anything or doesn't care. Like, I think sometimes being too smart or too into it or too much knowledge can hurt you.
Yeah. Yes. 100%.
I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many guys that this probably sounds cocky, but I don't mean it that way. But like, I'm probably more intelligent than they are.
Yeah.
And they've got businesses that are 2 or 3 times bigger than me, and we both started at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
They just get out of their way and go do the damn thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes the overanalyzation or the overthinking of something is what actually keeps us like back the most. And that's a, it's a good thing and it's a bad thing, right? Like it helps sometimes and other times it doesn't.
As long as it doesn't stop me from action, I think it's great. But I think a lot of times, especially for me, I will think about something for, like you said, you had a clip for your podcast for 18 months before you actually did it.
Yeah. Yeah. A little too long. Man, Chris, this has been awesome, man. Any last pieces of advice, whether it's on the marketing and branding side or whether it's just like general entrepreneurship that you would like to leave with the audience here today?
Yeah, I'm going to do 2 things. But one, you can't let fear dictate anything. If you let fear dictate your actions, it will hinder you so much. So in life, business, family, anything, just don't let fear decide. And 2, you can either pick time or money. And so if you want to get somewhere faster, you have to invest, whether that's a coach, whether that's a marketing company, whether that's, well, those are the 2 big things for me. But like, coaches have exponentially accelerated my path and they've changed who I was as a person. So I would say whether that's a free mentor you can find or just surrounding yourself with other people in your space or paying for coaching, it is absolutely worth it. 100%.
Love it, man. Well, thank you so much, man. This is awesome. I'm glad we had a chance to do it. Where can people stay connected with you online and, follow along in your journey?
Yeah. So Facebook and Instagram are the 2 biggest ones. Just Chris Treese. Everything is open. So.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me, buddy.
And thanks again to our title sponsor, Go High Level. Without them, we aren't able to produce the quality of content or have amazing guests on like we did today with Chris. Check out a free and extended 30-day trial in the show notes. Make sure as well to leave us a 5-star review. We're making a big push for reviews this year, and it definitely helps move the needle. And remember, authority isn't built overnight. It's built over time.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode. We sure do appreciate it. If you haven't done so already, make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you consume podcasts. This way you'll get notifications as new episodes become available. If you feel so inclined, please leave us a review. We sure do appreciate it. Until next time, friends.